to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the special edition of the Bliss Business Podcast. We are having a 5-series discussion about how to turn your marketing dollars into investments that pay off, that give you a great return. And we're talking with Josh Preiser, who's the VP of Digital Marketing at Zero Company. And so far, we've talked about how to turn your costs into an investment. The very first episode, we did a little bit of the fundamentals of marketing spend and introduced the concept of ROAS versus ROI. And then in episode 2, we talked about setting proper expectations and setting good goals to maximize your return on advertising spent. And then today in episode 3, we're going to talk about really about measuring your performance so that you can get better return on advertising spent. So today is all about crunching the numbers, know the numbers. How do you measure marketing performance for better ROAS? Let's go right into it. Welcome back, Josh. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
So first question I have for you is, what metrics are essential for measuring marketing investment performance? Let's start with that.
You know, it really does depend on your sales funnel. And that's why that exercise we did in the last episode is so important, to kind of walk through each step of the sales funnel and determine your action points and what your final goals are. Because the more steps we can track along the course of that sales funnel, the better your investment is going to turn out. But typically, some of the things you'd want to measure would be, contact form submissions, phone calls. One note I'll mention on phone calls is the default, let's say in Google Ads, is to track all calls that are at least 30 seconds in length. And of course, Google wants that number low because the more conversions they track, the better it looks like your campaign is going. If you're working with an agency, talk to them and make sure they're not sticking with that default. Most of us know a 30-second phone call probably wasn't a good phone call. So you probably don't want to track that as a conversion. You want to figure out a length that makes sense. Usually we say about 60 seconds is reasonable. But for some businesses, it might be 90 seconds, 2 minutes, etc. So pick a reasonable length for a phone call to track as a conversion action. And then, if you have the ability, or if you are actually, especially like in retail, if you have online sales that are happening, you want to be able to for sure track those sales on your site as well.
Great. So 30-second phone calls, probably not a good measurement of success.
Probably not. And
not the order form.
Yeah, anything that you can track. In fact, I should mention too, I forgot to mention what we sometimes refer to as soft conversions. So these are maybe steps along the sales funnel that would indicate the person is interested, even if they're not ready to take that next step just yet. So that might be like an email newsletter sign up, download of a white paper. Really, any action you think might indicate interest, you want to track that if at all possible.
And I would think this goes back to what we talked about in episode 2, which was the bottom of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and top of the funnel. So depending which campaign you're driving towards, there's going to be different conversion metrics, I would think. I like the idea of maybe it's an insurance agency. You call in and you got to make an appointment with an agent. That might actually take 30 seconds, right? So in that case, that might be a middle of the funnel kind of a lead, that's worthy of tracking. Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I always feel like you can't track too much. You really can't. I mean, you'll be surprised sometimes about the data that becomes interesting, where you start putting connections to that data and it starts to tell a story, and then you can eventually analyze it and take actions based on that data.
Okay, so we've talked about sort of a little bit of what to track, but how do you go about effectively tracking it and analyzing these metrics? What are some of the tools, some of the methodologies?
Yeah, I would say, after you've figured that out, what you want to track, you want to install Google Tag Manager on your website. And Google Tag Manager, it's a free tracking tool, but that allows you really from then within Google Tag Manager to set up everything else. So you definitely want to install Google Analytics. Current version is GA4. And then you use Google Tag Manager to set up that tracking code for all of the conversion actions that we determined we want to track. And really, we can track anything that has a thank you page. If someone hits a page, we go, oh, that's a conversion action. Or if it's a button click, we can track button clicks. Then what you do in Google Tag Managers, you set those items up to track as events in Google Analytics. Then in Google Analytics, you figure out the most important events. You mark those to track as conversions. And then you import the conversions from Google Analytics back into Google Ads. So it's a bit of a process. You definitely have to walk through each step and know what you're doing, but that's the general framework.
Okay, so I think we might have touched on it a little bit. Brings me to the next question in terms of tools and technology to effectively measure marketing performance. Is Google Analytics the end all and all? Is there something else?
I would say Google Analytics is the most commonly used one because it's free. There's certainly other analytics packages out there, but most, I'm sure 100% of our clients use Google Analytics. There's a couple that might use something else in addition. But, with Google Analytics, you break down the data by channel. So you can figure out, hey, did they come in via organic, paid search, display, email, direct traffic, etc. And then you can break each of those channels down further, figure out things like, okay, well, if they're coming from this channel, what's their average time on site? What's their engagement rate? What's their average engagement time, like when they're actively active on the site? And then also, like we mentioned, those events and those conversions. So there's a lot you can see just within Google Analytics.
So quick question, just to dig a little deeper. Once I have the data, who helps me figure out how to make the data translatable into metrics that's worthy? Who sets those KPIs? Is it the marketer? Is it the CFO? Is it a combination of the two? This goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Where you have to have those business conversations internally. How do you suggest that organizations go about that?
I recommend you have that conversation. You definitely want to have that conversation with your agency because they're going to have ideas on, hey, here's some things we think you should track. And anytime you have a conversation with multiple people, you're going to come up with new ideas, right? Oh, we should be tracking that, right? Someone goes, oh, well, we think about this and this and this. Oh, that's not actually important. But, that makes me think of, we should be tracking that action. So you definitely want those conversations about every step in that funnel of like anything you think of that could be important. You know what? I should mention one other thing. And this is something that I think often gets forgotten about. But if you use a CRM, bring that up to your ad agency and ask them if it's possible to integrate your CRM with Google Ads or whatever channel you're advertising on. Sometimes it's not possible, but more and more, there's more and more integrations. So, for example, I know Salesforce has an integration with Google Ads. Pretty new, I'd say within the last couple of years. And so if your sales team is grading the quality of leads or maybe the steps of how far that lead has progressed, we can actually bring that data back into Google Ads and track that lead beyond that initial step of, oh, they became a lead. Okay, well, how far down that lead funnel did they become a customer? Did they become a client? What happened with that person? Eventually, once you have enough data, we can use bidding algorithms to target more people that are more in line with our ideal customer. Who's a stronger lead? What do those people look like as far as demographics or psychographics? The more data we can feed in, the better and better our results are going to be.
Yeah, this is so important. If you don't have a CRM system, I highly suggest getting one to be able to track this data. And also you can do bolt-ons, like, for example, Marketo allows you to measure and score the various quality of the leads. So those become important. So we've talked about, you've got to know how the channels interpret or translate into sales. You have to be able to measure how those things all along the funnel translate into sales and ultimately how it impacts the bottom line. But let's talk a little bit more now about attribution, the different attribution models, and how do you measure that against your marketing investment? And maybe give us a little breakdown of the various different advertising attribution models that are out there.
Yeah, so this is a topic I love because it really makes a big difference, and it's often an area that's forgotten. So traditionally, most conversion tracking systems use last click attribution. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone is going out and they're browsing online, and then they see a display ad and it's for something. Oh, maybe I am interested in that. And they click that display ad. Okay, well, that's their first touch, right? And they look and they go, okay, interesting. Yeah, not for me right now, but now it's in their head. So a few days later, maybe they go, you know what, let me do a Google search and look for info on that. All right, well, now they click on a paid search ad, a PPC ad. Okay, well, that's their second touch. So we had display, and then we had a paid search ad. Okay, well, now they come, I'm good. And then later they go and they do another search. This time they scroll past the paid search stuff and they click an organic listing. They go, oh, I recognize that company. Let me click that. So now they've got an organic touch. Maybe somewhere in there they get another organic touch. And then eventually they go, okay, yeah, I'm ready to move forward with this. But I remember the company now, so let me just type in their website directly. Okay, well, now that final touch is a direct. So we had display, paid search, organic, direct. So now they actually fill out a form or they have a phone call and become a lead. So who gets the credit? Who gets the credit, right? We had multiple touches there.
This is a big problem with marketing, right?
It is.
CMOs. It's like trying to prove that all these different touch points actually contributed to that direct sale.
And you can see that sales funnel. That's another thing that's awesome in Google Analytics. You can see that that attribution, and you can see your average, what that funnel looks like, and how many touch points you have. And so traditionally, you'd use last click attribution, and so direct would get the credit. Okay, but if you do that, if you're only using last click attribution, all these other things get discounted. And what will eventually happen is, let's say even with Google Ads, keywords that are higher funnel sales keywords end up getting shut off because they look like they have zero conversions, right? Someone's, I don't know. Let's take something basic that has a long sales funnel, like maybe buying a car. A top of funnel sales keyword might be something like, best cars of 2024. Okay, I'm really early in my process, right? I haven't figured anything out other than I need a car. Well, that keyword is never going to be a last click, right? That's never going to be a last touch. So if you're only tracking last click, you're going to end up shutting that keyword off when really that may start the funnel. So I would definitely recommend using a more advanced attribution model. Most of the time now we use what's called a data-driven model, and that'll assign value to each step in the sales funnel. Not always equal value. Usually your first click and your last click are your most important along that sales funnel. But you usually want to use some sort of data-driven model so that you're not dismissing keywords or steps that are higher up in the sales funnel.
Tip. The next episode, we're going to dig into a lot on data decision models. Okay, so this is also kind of bringing full circle the conversation we had in the last episode, the danger of just focusing on bottom of the funnel campaigns, right? Because once you dry that out and you've got nothing else feeding into it, it's exactly what you just described, right? You might have gotten a direct or a quick last call attribution, but what got it there was all this other activity that you can't just ignore. So is there a way to get really effective at that? I mean, does it exist yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it depends on the channel you're using, but for example, in Google Ads, there are options for selecting different attribution models And there's actually even tools where you can model the attribution models and see which one makes the most sense for your business. But again, most of the time we'll use a data-driven model, and you can set that directly in Google Ads and say, hey, for this conversion action, I want to track it using a data-driven attribution model so that I'm measuring every step in that sales funnel.
Okay, so that's great. My final question before we go into that, I want to just kind of set the context a little bit. Some of the stuff is fairly complicated if you're a brand new marketer, or if you're a business owner that doesn't have the time to go through all this, but maybe has a team or an office manager, if you're a really small business, that they've sort of said, go make this happen, right? So ultimately, they're going to call an agency. In most cases, they're going to call an agency like a Zero company and say, can you help me? What are some of the key things? And this is the big question. If you're watching this, if you're a small business owner, or even if you're a marketer that's just trying to determine if you've got the right agency on your side, what are some of the telltale signs and questions? I might be giving away our secret sauce to our competitors who might be watching this, but what are the telltale signs for a customer to determine if they're picking the right agency? What should they be asking? What should they be hearing as questions from the agency that says, these guys really understand what's going on here? Because often enough, what happens is like, I have this budget, this is what I want to do. And the agent's like, okay, I'll be the order taker, just go do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that the right agency? Probably not. Tell me a little bit. What do you think?
No, your agency should be interviewing you as well. Really. I mean, the agency should be asking detailed questions to make sure, to see how much you understand about how your business is working and what are the gaps. You know, probably it's pretty rare to meet a business that has filled in all of the gaps, right? That's why they're coming. They need some help. So we want to figure out, your agency should be trying to figure out where are the gaps in the knowledge and where are the gaps in the measuring and the tracking, et cetera, so that we can figure out what do we need to do. And then you also, I think, want to be looking for, you know, do I connect with these people? You know, because ultimately it comes down to people, right? I mean, we say, oh, that's business B2B, but B2B is still people to people, right? It's person to person. So you want to make sure that you're connecting with that account executive who's going to be managing your account. And I would encourage too, if you like what you're hearing from the agency, you go, wow, I really like what I'm hearing. This makes sense. I think this is a good fit. But man, for whatever reason, I'm just not feeling it with this account exec. Then mention that to the sales team and tell them, hey, you know, I think I think a different account exec might be a better fit for me. That's not a bad thing to ask or to do. Honestly, sometimes even internally, we'll recognize that and go, you know what? This personality fit isn't the best. We really like this client. We really want to keep working with them. And we actually encourage our AEs. They'll come to me sometimes and go, hey, look, I love this client, but I think we're just not communicating well. So let's do a swap. We never want to be overly cautious about that. We want to do what's right by the client.
So important. So if you meet with an agency and after the meeting you feel a little upset and you're like, man, we don't have our stuff together, that's probably a good sign.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you might choose an agency that's empathetic as well. That's not only just asking the right questions, but you have a good connection. And if you don't have a good connection with the AE, don't discard the agency. Maybe ask for a different person who might buy better with, because that happens. That's reality of life. That happens sometimes, you know. Okay, so final question. What challenges do businesses face when measuring marketing ROI? We talked about ROAS, but ultimately it's about what kind of a return on this investment am I going to get for the business?
Yep.
And how can they overcome them?
Yeah, I can think of a couple challenges that are consistent that we see all the time. Again, I'd say the biggest problem is tracking, not setting up to track all of the items we talked about today. Or sometimes too, we'll see businesses run into an obstacle when it comes to setting up the tracking code and then not work to overcome it. You know, we'll hear, well, you know, our website's set up kind of weird and we really can't track this action. Well, fix it. You know, if you're investing your money in a stock and your broker said, well, it's really good stock, but we're not going to be able to track how your investment is doing. You wouldn't accept that. Don't accept it with your marketing. Figure out how to track everything you possibly can. Most problems are solvable, but there are definitely sometimes challenges in setting up that tracking code. Don't give up on it. Push it through to completion. And if your agency isn't, your agency should be pushing for that hard. But if they're not, that's also a sign that, maybe are they nervous about what kind of results they're going to see when the real tracking is in place?
You can't be an ostrich in this business. You cannot stick your hand in the sand.
No, you can't. You can't. And the second challenge, again, related to this is not taking the time to identify all those steps in the sales funnel. It's just saying, well, we end up with sales. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of steps that get to that. Identify all those potential mini conversion actions along that sales funnel, because you can't set up tracking if you don't know what to track. So you have to take the time to work through all those steps. And if you're tracking all those steps, like I said, it's often amazing what you'll learn. You'll see things like, oh wow, 80% of the people who download a white paper end up buying from us. Okay, so what do I do with that? Well, how can I change the website to make the download of the white paper more obvious for users? How can I push more users to download a white paper? Because we know that that's an important step in the sales process because we're tracking it. Or, again, Google Analytics shows us exit pages. Sometimes you go through and you go, that's interesting. 68% of the people who get to this page on our website leave from there. Why? What can we change on that page to keep them engaged? Or should we remove that page from our website? Is it confusing them? So you never want to stop analyzing that data and looking for little ways to improve, because those little improvements add up over time.
Absolutely. It's not like Mad Men. You can't just get away with charisma and just, guerrilla tactics and creativity. Data is your friend.
It is.
You love the data. And that's a perfect segue into introducing the next episode. Come back as we talk about how to optimize your marketing spend with data. How important is the data? It's do or die by data. That's really what it's about. Thanks for joining us again. See you again on the next episode.